A 12-year-old street girl jumped in to save a wealthy man without hesitation. But what he told her after left everyone stunned. He wanted to adopt her, and she quietly replied her mother would be coming too. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The wind coming off Lake Michigan cut through Sarah Jensen's thin jacket like it wasn't even there. Chicago winters had always been brutal, but this January felt particularly cruel, as if the weather itself was conspiring with her circumstances. Standing outside her apartment building, Sarah's hands trembled as she unfolded the cream-colored stationery for the 20th time, though she'd already memorized every word. "Sarah, you need to understand that our worlds are incompatible. A suburban waitress without a college degree simply has no place in the future I've planned for myself. Wall Street, Manhattan, and the Thompson Hotels Board demand a partner of equal standing, not someone who can barely afford rent in Cicero. This pregnancy was a mistake, and I cannot allow it to compromise everything I've worked for. There's $5,000 in the envelope. Use it wisely." The elegant handwriting belonged to Maxwell Thompson, heir to one of America's largest hotel chains, and, until 3 weeks ago, the man Sarah believed loved her. The man who had swept her off her feet 6 months earlier when he stopped for coffee at the Denny's where she worked the night shift. The man who had looked at her with those piercing blue eyes and said, "I've never met anyone quite like you, Sarah." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, forming a small cloud in the freezing air. 6 months of expensive dinners, designer gifts, and whispered promises of a future together, all evaporated with a single positive pregnancy test. Sarah slid the letter back into her purse and glanced at the eviction notice taped to her apartment door. Second one this month. Her landlord had made it clear, 3 days to pay up or get out. With her hours at Denny's cut back, customers don't feel comfortable with an unwed pregnant waitress, her manager had explained with feigned sympathy. Making rent had become impossible. 3 weeks ago, Maxwell's final words to her face had been even crueler than his letter. She could still see him, standing in his penthouse, looking down at her as if she were something unpleasant stuck to his Italian leather shoes. "You're too boring for my world, Sarah. No education, no connections, no refinement. A pregnancy isn't going to trap me into a mediocre life." Then he'd disappeared, changed his number, blocked her emails. When she'd tried to find him at his office to show him the ultrasound, his lawyer had threatened a restraining order. Now here she was, 23 years old, 4 months pregnant, with nowhere to turn. Both her parents had died in a car accident when she was 16, leaving her with no family to speak of. She had aged out of foster care and been on her own ever since. Sarah trudged back to her Honda Civic, a rust-spotted 1998 model that had seen better days. The car had become her closet over the past week as she prepared for the inevitable. 3 garbage bags of clothes and personal items filled the back seat. Her few pieces of furniture would have to be abandoned. "We'll be okay," she whispered, placing a hand over her slightly rounded belly. Somehow. The next morning, Sarah arrived early for her shortened shift at Denny's. As she tied her apron, already growing tight around her middle, her manager Doris eyed her with a mixture of pity and disapproval. "Table 6 needs coffee," was all she said. Sarah grabbed the pot and made her way through the half-empty restaurant. Most customers barely looked up as she refilled their cups, but an elderly couple at the corner booth made no attempt to hide their whispers. "Look, another one who got herself in trouble," the woman said, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "These uneducated girls never learn." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she poured, but she forced a smile. "Can I get you anything else?" After her Denny's shift ended at 1 o'clock, Sarah drove straight to her second job as a pharmacy cashier at Walgreens. Between scanning prescriptions and ringing up vitamins, she discreetly massaged her lower back, already aching from standing all day. "You feeling okay?" her supervisor asked, noticing Sarah's discomfort. "Just tired," Sarah replied. It had become her standard answer for everything. By 7 that evening, she clocked out and headed to her third job, Night cleaning at a downtown office building. The janitorial company didn't ask questions as long as the floors were mopped and the trash emptied. The pregnant belly was invisible beneath the shapeless uniform, and for that small mercy, Sarah was grateful. As she vacuumed between desks in a tech company's office, Sarah felt a wave of nausea hit her. Morning sickness, ironically, was worse at night. She quickly ducked into the nearest bathroom, reaching the toilet just in time. Afterward, splashing cold water on her face, Sarah caught her reflection in the mirror. Pale skin, dark circles under her eyes, lifeless brown hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Nothing like the woman who had caught Maxwell Thompson's eyes 6 months ago, when her smile had been quick and her eyes bright with hope. "You're nobody," she whispered to her reflection, echoing Maxwell's assessment. Then she straightened her shoulders. "But this baby will be somebody." That night, Sarah parked her Honda in the far corner of a Walmart parking lot. She'd discovered that security rarely bothered cars parked near the garden center, especially if you moved spots every couple of days. Reclining the driver's seat as far as it would go, she wrapped herself in a threadbare blanket and tried to find a comfortable position. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by the cold seeping through the windows, the uncomfortable angle of her neck, and the occasional security patrol sweeping flashlights across the lot. At 3 in the morning, she gave up and drove to a 24-hour gas station to use the bathroom and wash up as best she could in the sink. 2 days later, the car had become her permanent home. Each morning, Sarah would wake before dawn, drive to a different gas station to clean up, change clothes in the back seat, and head to her first job. Between shifts, she would park at a public library, using their bathroom and warmth until her next work commitment. The nights were the hardest. Alone in the dark, the reality of her situation crashed over her in waves. How had she, Sarah Jensen, ended up homeless and pregnant at 23? How had she so completely misread Maxwell Thompson? She remembered their first meeting vividly. It had been a slow Tuesday night at Denny's. Maxwell had come in around 11, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He'd ordered just a coffee, explaining he'd just finished a hotel industry conference and couldn't stomach another rubber chicken dinner. "You've got an honest smile," he'd told her, leaving a $100 bill as a tip with his phone number scrawled on the receipt. "I'd like to see it again." Their first date had been at a restaurant where the menus had no prices. He'd ordered for her in fluent French and asked about her dreams. No man had ever been interested in her dreams before. "I always wanted to go to college," she'd admitted. "Study business, maybe, but after my parents died, there was no money." "A beautiful mind trapped by circumstance," he'd replied, touching her hand. "That's a tragedy." For 6 months, he'd shown her glimpses of a world she'd never known existed. Broadway shows during business trips to New York, a weekend in Miami at the Thompson Hotel's presidential suite, designer dresses that arrived in boxes with handwritten notes, and always, the promise that she was special, different, that he saw something in her no one else had. The night she told him about the pregnancy, everything changed. The charm vanished, replaced by cold calculation. His face had hardened into something unrecognizable. "This is inconvenient," he'd said, as if she'd spilled wine on his carpet rather than told him they were having a child. Now, sitting in her freezing car, Sarah placed both hands on her belly. "We don't need him," she whispered fiercely. "We'll make it on our own." But as another week passed, the reality of her situation grew more desperate. Sleeping in the car was taking its physical toll. Her back ached constantly. The morning sickness hadn't subsided. The few dollars she managed to save went to food and gas, with nothing left for future housing. One night, while cleaning the executive offices, Sarah found herself drawn to an open manual on a desk. "Introduction to Cybersecurity: Protecting Digital Assets," read the title. Curiosity piqued, she began flipping through the pages, fascinated by diagrams of network security protocols. On impulse, she pulled out her cheap flip phone and started taking photos of the pages. Maybe she could learn something, Anything that might lead to better employment. As she was photographing a particularly complex diagram, a voice behind her made her jump. Most people would just steal the manual if they were interested. Sarah whirled around to face a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm so sorry, sir. I wasn't stealing. I was just curious and She stammered, certain she was about to lose her third job. The man raised his hand. "Relax. I'm Richard Keller, head of security here, and I'm more intrigued than angry. Why is my cleaning lady photographing advanced firewall configuration pages?" Something in his tone made Sarah decide on honesty. "I need a better job. My situation is complicated, and this looked interesting. I thought maybe I could learn something useful." Keller studied her for a moment, his eyes taking in her uniform, her exhausted posture, and finally, the slight bulge of her pregnancy that the baggy clothes couldn't quite hide. "Do you understand any of what you were reading?" he asked. "Some. It's about creating barriers between trusted and untrusted networks, right? Like castle walls and moats for computer systems." A smile spread across Keller's face. "That's actually a very good analogy. Do you have any technical background?" "No, sir, just high school, but I learn quickly." Keller glanced at his watch. "It's late. Are you hungry? I was about to order some food." Over Chinese takeout in his office, Sarah found herself telling Richard Keller her story, the abbreviated version, omitting Maxwell's name and focusing on her current predicament. "So you're sleeping in your car while working 3 jobs and pregnant?" Keller summarized, his expression troubled. "No family to help?" "None," Sarah confirmed, embarrassed by the pity in his eyes. Keller was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. "I need to make a call." Sarah listened as he spoke softly to someone named Elaine, catching phrases like "young woman in trouble" and "spare room in the basement." When he hung up, he turned to Sarah with a proposition. "My wife has multiple sclerosis. She needs help around the house during the day while I'm at work. We have a finished basement with its own bathroom. It's not fancy, but it's warm and private. You could live there, help Elaine during your free hours, and I could teach you cybersecurity in the evenings." Sarah stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Keller's smile was sad. "Because 20 years ago someone did something similar for me when I needed it. And because the questions you asked about that manual told me you have an analytical mind that's being wasted on cleaning floors." That night, as Sarah followed Keller's car to his modest suburban home, tears streamed down her face. Not tears of sadness or self-pity, but of fierce determination. Never again, she promised her unborn child as the wipers cleared the January snow from her windshield. "Never again will anyone look at us with pity or contempt. Never again will we depend on the kindness of men like Maxwell Thompson. I'm going to build a world where we'll be admired, not pitied." As she drove through the snowy Chicago streets toward an unexpected sanctuary, Sarah Jensen couldn't possibly imagine that in 12 years' time, it would be her signature that could either save or destroy Maxwell Thompson's empire with a single stroke of a pen. Sarah's life transformed overnight. The Keller's basement wasn't luxurious, but compared to the back seat of her Honda Civic, it felt like a palace. A twin bed with fresh linens, a small desk with a reading lamp, a private bathroom with hot water that never ran out. Simple comforts that had become unimaginable luxuries. "Is there anything else you need?" Elaine Keller asked on Sarah's first morning. Despite her MS, which confined her to a wheelchair most days, Elaine's eyes were kind and her smile genuine. "Richard told me you're expecting. When are you due?" "June," Sarah replied, unconsciously placing a hand on her growing belly. "I don't know how to thank you both for this." "You can thank us by taking care of yourself and learning everything my husband has to teach you," Elaine said, reaching for Sarah's hand. "Richard has a good eye for potential. If he says you've got what it takes, I believe him." That night, after helping Elaine with dinner and cleanup, Sarah found Richard in his home office, surrounded by computer monitors. "Ready for your first lesson?" he asked, gesturing to a chair beside him. "More than ready," Sarah replied, trying to ignore her aching feet. The physical demands of pregnancy combined with her multiple jobs had left her perpetually exhausted, but this opportunity was too precious to waste. Richard pushed a thick textbook toward her. "Start with the basics. Read the first 3 chapters tonight if you can. Tomorrow we'll discuss concepts and I'll show you practical applications." Sarah stayed up until 2 in the morning, absorbing information about network protocols, encryption methods, and security vulnerabilities. Despite her exhaustion, her mind felt electric with possibilities. This wasn't just information, it was a ladder out of the pit Maxwell had left her in. The next evening, Richard was visibly impressed by her comprehension. "You've got a natural talent for recognizing patterns. That's essential in cybersecurity, seeing the anomalies that others miss." Over the next several weeks, Sarah developed a routine. Mornings were spent helping Elaine with her physical therapy and household tasks. Afternoons were for her remaining jobs. She'd quit the overnight cleaning position but kept her shifts at Denny's and the pharmacy. Evenings were dedicated to learning from Richard, who proved to be a patient and thorough teacher. "You're grasping concepts in weeks that took my college interns months to understand," Richard remarked one night as Sarah successfully identified vulnerabilities in a practice system he'd set up. Sarah rubbed her lower back, trying to find a comfortable position as her pregnancy advanced. "I can't afford to learn slowly. This baby is coming whether I'm ready or not." Richard's expression softened. "May I ask about the father? Is he in the picture at all?" Sarah's face hardened. "He made it very clear that a pregnant waitress would tarnish his perfect life. His exact words were that I'm too boring for his world. No education, no connections, no refinement." "Well, he's a fool," Richard said simply, "and someday he'll realize exactly what he threw away." As February turned to March and March to April, Sarah's body changed dramatically while her mind expanded with new knowledge. Her pregnant belly now protruded prominently, making her uniform at Denny's strain at the seams. Regular customers who had once whispered behind her back now offered congratulations and asked about her due date. "You're glowing," an elderly regular told her one morning. "Something's different about you, more than just the baby." What was different, Sarah knew, was hope. For the first time since Maxwell's rejection, she could envision a future beyond mere survival. By her 7th month, Sarah had progressed from reading textbooks to writing basic security scripts. Richard had given her access to online courses and introduced her to colleagues who specialized in different aspects of cybersecurity. Every minute not spent working or helping Elaine was devoted to learning. "You need to rest more," Elaine cautioned one evening, finding Sarah hunched over a keyboard, dark circles under her eyes. "That baby needs you healthy." "I'll rest when we're secure," Sarah replied, but she did allow Elaine to guide her to the couch, where the older woman massaged her swollen feet while Sarah continued reading from a tablet. As her due date approached, Sarah reluctantly reduced her hours at both jobs, cutting her already modest income. Richard and Elaine insisted she focus on her health, refusing to accept more than a token contribution toward household expenses. "Consider it an investment in both your futures," Richard said when Sarah protested. "Besides, you've been a godsend for Elaine. Her spirits haven't been this high in years." It was true. The two women had formed a bond that transcended their arrangement. Elaine taught Sarah about classical music, literature, and art, the refinement Maxwell had found her lacking. In return, Sarah brought energy and purpose to Elaine's days, along with the vicarious excitement of an impending birth. One warm evening in late May, as Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor of her room, practicing a coding challenge Richard had set for her, she felt the first contraction. Initially dismissing it as Braxton Hicks, she continued working until a second, stronger wave forced her to acknowledge that labor had begun. "Richard," she called, making her way carefully up the basement stairs. I think it's time." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of pain, determination, and ultimately, transformation. In the delivery room, the nurse asked the question Sarah had been dreading. "Will the father be joining us?" "No," Sarah replied between contractions. "It's just me." "Not just you," corrected Elaine, who had insisted on being there despite her own physical limitations. "Never just you again." At 3:17 in the morning on June 7th, Emily Jensen entered the world with a powerful cry that seemed to announce her presence to the universe. As the nurse placed the red-faced, squirming bundle on Sarah's chest, time seemed to stop. "Hello, Emily," Sarah whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes through tears of exhaustion and joy. "We've been waiting for you." Looking into her daughter's face, Sarah was struck by the unmistakable resemblance to Maxwell, the same shape of eyes, the same delicate nose. But rather than pain, she felt a strange sense of triumph. This perfect being was half hers, created from the union with a man who thought her unworthy. Yet here she was, bringing this child into the world through her own strength, without him. 2 days later, Richard arrived at the hospital with an unexpected gift, a small laptop. "For the future programmer," he said with a wink, placing it on the bedside table. "And these are for now." He handed Sarah a stack of professional journals on cybersecurity trends. "You think I'll have time to read with a newborn?" Sarah laughed, but her eyes shone with gratitude. "I think you'll make time because that's who you are," Richard replied. That night, alone with Emily in the quiet hospital room, Sarah held her sleeping daughter and made a solemn vow. "Maxwell Thompson thinks I'm insignificant, that I'll never be more than a waitress," she whispered to the tiny form in her arms. "One day, he'll discover how profoundly he misjudged us. I promise you a life so extraordinary that he'll regret every day he chose not to be part of it." The first months of Emily's life tested Sarah's resolve daily. Caring for a newborn while continuing her studies seemed nearly impossible. Many nights, she paced the basement room with a fussy Emily in one arm and a textbook in the other, reading paragraphs between soothing murmurs and gentle bounces. Richard and Elaine proved invaluable, with Elaine often watching the baby during the day so Sarah could catch up on sleep or study. By the time Emily was 3 months old, Sarah had completed several online certification courses in network security, earning credentials that Richard assured her would open doors. "The field is desperate for talent," he explained, "and you have a natural aptitude that can't be taught." When Emily turned 6 months old, Richard came home with news that would change everything. "My company is opening a small satellite office in Boston," he said during dinner. "They've asked me to head it up, focusing on financial sector security. Elaine and I have decided to accept." Sarah's heart sank. As much as she knew this arrangement couldn't last forever, the thought of losing their support terrified her. "We want you and Emily to come with us," Elaine added, seeing Sarah's expression. "Boston has an incredible tech ecosystem. MIT, Harvard, dozens of security firms. It's the perfect place for you to build a career." "I couldn't impose," Sarah began, but Richard cut her off. "It's not an imposition. It's practical for all of us. Elaine needs your help. We've grown attached to that little munchkin, and you need a launching pad for your career. Massachusetts also has better support systems for single mothers." 2 months later, Sarah stood in the Kellers' driveway, supervising as movers loaded the last of their belongings. Her old Honda had been sold, the proceeds forming a modest emergency fund. In its place was a used but reliable Toyota that Richard had helped her purchase. "You've saved our lives," Sarah told the couple as they prepared to depart. "I'll never forget what you've done for us." "Just promise me one thing," Richard said. "When you're running your own security firm someday, and I have no doubt you will be, remember to pay it forward." The journey to Boston marked the beginning of a new chapter. As they crossed state lines, 8-month-old Emily babbled happily in her car seat, unaware of the significance of their migration. Sarah glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror and felt a surge of determination stronger than any she'd experienced before. In her mind, she could still hear Maxwell's dismissive voice. "You're too boring for my world, Sarah. No education, no connections, no refinement." Each mile took her further from those words and closer to proving them wrong. With a laptop beside her containing her certifications, training materials, and the beginnings of a business plan, Sarah drove toward Boston, and toward a future that Maxwell Thompson, in his arrogance, had never imagined possible for the waitress he'd discarded. As she crossed into Massachusetts, Sarah didn't know that she was taking the first steps on a journey that would lead her from cleaning rooms to the top of the tech industry, on a collision course with the man who had thrown her away. The Massachusetts landscape unfolded outside the Toyota's windows as Sarah crossed the state line, Emily babbling happily in her car seat. The late spring sunshine bathed the highway in golden light, almost as if nature itself were welcoming them to their new beginning. Sarah's fingers tightened around the steering wheel as Boston's skyline appeared on the horizon. "Look, Emily," she said softly, though her 8-month-old daughter was more interested in the plush elephant clutched in her tiny hands. "That's going to be our home." The Kellers had arranged a modest one-bedroom apartment in Cambridge for them, a temporary solution until Sarah could establish herself. When they arrived after the 6-hour drive, Richard helped carry their few belongings up 3 flights of stairs while Elaine entertained Emily. "It's not much," Richard apologized as Sarah surveyed the cramped space with its worn carpet and dated appliances. "It's perfect," Sarah replied firmly. After sleeping in a car, this small apartment felt like a mansion. "It's ours." That first night, after the Kellers left for their own new home in Brookline, Sarah laid a mattress on the floor for herself and Emily. As her daughter slept peacefully beside her, Sarah opened her laptop and began mapping out her future, creating a detailed timeline of goals and milestones. Within a week, Sarah had established a routine. Mornings were dedicated to Emily, feeding, playing, development exercises recommended by parenting books she'd borrowed from the library. Afternoons, while Emily napped, she worked remotely as an entry-level security analyst for the company Richard had connected her with. Evenings, after Emily went to bed, she studied cybersecurity materials for hours, improving her skills and working toward additional certifications. 3 months into their Boston life, Richard mentioned a special opportunity over dinner at the Kellers' home. MIT offers a few seats to non-matriculated students in their advanced computing courses, he explained, passing a platter of roast chicken. "With my recommendation, you might qualify for their evening cybersecurity program." Sarah's fork paused midway to her mouth. "I don't have a bachelor's degree. Would they even consider me?" "The professor is an old colleague of mine. He values practical skills over credentials." Richard smiled. "Besides, I showed him that vulnerability assessment you did last month. He was impressed." 2 weeks later, Sarah found herself sitting nervously in the back row of a MIT lecture hall, surrounded by graduate students and industry professionals. The professor, Dr. Harrington, was discussing advanced encryption protocols, and Sarah was taking notes furiously, determined not to miss a single concept. "Ms. Jensen," Dr. Harrington called, making Sarah freeze. "Perhaps you could explain to the class why asymmetric encryption provides superior security for data transmission?" For a terrifying moment, Sarah felt like the waitress at Denny's again, out of place, judged, unprepared. Then she took a deep breath and recalled everything she'd learned from Richard and her own studies. Her explanation was concise, technical, and accurate. When she finished, Dr. Harrington nodded with approval. "Precisely, and an excellent real-world perspective that many academically trained specialists miss. Thank you." That night, Sarah arrived home at 11:30, exhausted but exhilarated. The babysitter, a graduate student from down the hall, reported that Emily had been perfect, falling asleep promptly at 7. Sarah paid the sitter, then tiptoed into the bedroom where Emily slept in her crib. Gently stroking her daughter's soft hair, Sarah whispered, "I did it, baby girl. I belonged in that classroom, and someday, everyone will know it. As months passed, Sarah's reputation as a diligent student and skilled analyst grew. She rarely slept more than 4 hours a night, dividing her time between Emily, remote work, MIT courses, and independent study. The physical toll was evident. She lost weight, dark circles formed under her eyes, and she existed on a diet of coffee and quick meals. But her mind had never been sharper. By Emily's first birthday, Sarah had completed 3 certifications and was earning enough from her remote security work to afford a slightly better apartment. The celebration was small, just the Kellers and a chocolate cupcake with a single candle. But Sarah felt a profound sense of progress. "Your mommy is going to change the world," Richard told Emily as she smeared frosting across her face. "You just watch." Emily responded by offering him a sticky, chocolate-covered hand, which he accepted with a laugh. When Emily turned 18 months old, Sarah faced her first major challenge. Dr. Harrington assigned a practical project. Students were to assess the security of a major company's digital infrastructure and provide recommendations for improvement. Sarah chose the hotel industry, recalling her connection to Maxwell and knowing that hotel chains stored valuable customer data. For weeks, she immersed herself in research, analyzing the online reservation systems of major chains. Using only publicly available information and legal methods, she mapped vulnerabilities and potential attack vectors. One night, working well past midnight, she discovered something alarming in the Hilton Hotel's reservation platform, a previously undocumented security flaw that could potentially expose guests' credit card information. Sarah sat back in her chair, heart racing. The vulnerability was significant. In unethical hands, it could be exploited for massive financial fraud. Ethically, she needed to report it. But how? She was just a student, a former waitress with no formal credentials. Would they even take her seriously? For 3 days, Sarah debated her approach. Finally, she compiled a comprehensive report, documenting the vulnerability in precise technical terms and, most importantly, developing a potential solution. Using her growing programming skills, she created a patch that would address the security gap. "This is your protection implementation proposal?" Richard asked, reviewing her work one evening while Elaine played with Emily. "Sarah, this is professional-grade security architecture. You're not thinking like a student anymore." Sarah smiled tiredly. "I can't afford to think like a student. Emily deserves better than that." With hands that trembled slightly, Sarah composed an email to Hilton's Chief Information Security Officer. She attached her report, explained the vulnerability in clear terms, and offered her solution. After proofreading it 3 times, she clicked send and tried not to get her hopes up. As Emily's second birthday approached, Sarah continued her relentless schedule. The days blurred together, remote work, classes, studying, and precious hours with Emily, watching her daughter grow more curious and verbal by the day. There had been no response from Hilton, and Sarah had almost forgotten about her report, assuming it had been lost in a corporate inbox or dismissed as amateur work. Then, on a Wednesday morning as she prepared Emily's breakfast, her phone rang. "Is this Sarah Jensen?" a formal voice asked. "Yes, speaking." "This is Marcus Williams, Deputy CISO at Hilton Hotels. We need to meet with you regarding the security report you submitted. How soon can you come to our Boston office?" Sarah nearly dropped the phone. I have a daughter. I would need to arrange childcare. This is a matter of some urgency, Ms. Jensen. Would tomorrow at 10 be possible? We can send a car for you." After hanging up, Sarah called Richard in a panic. "They want to meet about my report. What if they're angry? What if they think I was hacking their system?" "You did everything ethically," Richard reassured her. "They're not calling to accuse you. They're calling because you found something their own security team missed." The next morning, Sarah stood before her closet facing a dilemma. She owned exactly one professional outfit, a navy blue skirt and blazer from a thrift store that she'd worn to MIT interviews. It was slightly too large after her weight loss from stress and overwork, but it was the best she had. She pulled her hair into a neat bun, applied minimal makeup to hide her exhaustion, and kissed Emily goodbye, leaving her with Elaine for the day. The Hilton corporate offices in downtown Boston occupied 3 floors of a gleaming high-rise. As the elevator ascended, Sarah repeated a mantra in her head. "You belong here. Your work has value. You are not just a waitress." She was escorted to a conference room where 4 serious-faced executives sat waiting. For 2 hours, they questioned her about the vulnerability she'd discovered, her methodology, and her proposed solution. Sarah answered with growing confidence, her technical knowledge evident in every response. Finally, Marcus Williams leaned forward. "Ms. Jensen, to be blunt, our team missed what you found. The vulnerability you identified could have resulted in a catastrophic data breach. Your solution is elegant and effective. We've already implemented a version of it as an emergency patch." Sarah nodded, unsure how to respond. "We'd like to offer you a consulting contract," he continued. $150,000 for the complete implementation of your security solution across our reservation platform." The amount was so far beyond Sarah's expectations that she thought she'd misheard. That was more money than she would have made in 5 years at Denny's. I work remotely," she managed, thinking of Emily. "I'm a single mother." Williams nodded. "We can accommodate that. 80% remote work, with occasional on-site meetings as needed." That evening, Sarah sat on the floor of their apartment, watching Emily stack colorful blocks with intense concentration. The meeting had ended with a signed preliminary agreement and a promise to finalize the contract within a week. "We did it, Emily," she whispered, her voice catching. "We really did it." 2 weeks later, Sarah received the first payment from Hilton, a deposit of $50,000. She stared at her bank account on the screen, the number so foreign it seemed like a typo. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" the bank teller asked as Sarah deposited the check, noting her stunned expression. "Yes," Sarah replied, a smile spreading across her face. "Everything is finally okay." The first thing Sarah did was secure a better apartment, a 2-bedroom in a safer neighborhood with good schools nearby. As she and Emily moved into their new home, the toddler ran excitedly from room to room. "My room?" Emily asked in wonder, staring at the space that would be entirely her own for the first time in her life. "Yes, baby. Your very own room." Sarah knelt beside her daughter. "It's like a castle, isn't it?" "Castle," Emily agreed enthusiastically, twirling in the empty space. With her new income secured, Sarah invested in professional equipment, a powerful computer setup, specialized security software, and reference materials. She converted the apartment's small dining area into a home office, with Emily helping to connect cables and arrange furniture. The Hilton contract led to others. Word spread in the industry about the brilliant security consultant who had prevented a potentially devastating breach. By the time Emily was 2.5, Sarah was juggling multiple clients and considering hiring an assistant. On a crisp autumn day, Sarah met with a lawyer recommended by Richard to discuss forming her own company. As they reviewed the incorporation documents for Jensen Tech Solutions, the reality of how far she'd come suddenly hit her. Tears welled unexpectedly as she signed her name to the official papers. "Mommy, you're crying?" Emily asked, looking up from the coloring book the lawyer had given her. Sarah wiped her eyes, smiling through the tears. "These are happy tears, my love. They mean we'll never have to worry about having a roof over our heads again." As Sarah walked home that afternoon, holding Emily's small hand in hers, she couldn't help but think of Maxwell Thompson, the man who had deemed her too boring, too uneducated, too unrefined for his world. If he could see her now, founder and CEO of her own technology company, with clients that included the very industry he operated in, while signing the documents that officially established Jensen Tech Solutions, Sarah couldn't know that in just 8 years her company would become the primary digital protector of the same hotel networks where Maxwell Thompson was desperately trying to save his collapsing empire. Sarah clutched the incorporation papers to her chest as she and Emily walked home through the crisp Boston autumn. The official formation of Jensen Tech Solutions felt surreal, a milestone that would have seemed impossible when she was sleeping in her car just 2 years ago. Maxwell's dismissive words echoed in her mind, a waitress from the suburbs without a college degree. If only he could see her now. 2 weeks after filing the incorporation papers, Sarah received an unexpected call from Marcus Williams at Hilton. "Our CEO mentioned your security implementation to colleagues at the Marriott conference," he explained. "They're interested in a consultation. I hope you don't mind that I shared your contact information." Sarah nearly dropped her phone. "Not at all. Thank you for the referral." By the end of the month, her client list had grown to include 3 more hotel chains. Sarah found herself working 14-hour days, juggling consultations while caring for Emily, who had just turned 2. The toddler was speaking in complete sentences now, and demonstrating an uncanny ability to solve simple puzzles meant for much older children. "I need help," Sarah admitted to Richard during their weekly dinner at the Kellers. "There's too much work for one person." "That's what we call a good problem," Richard smiled. "I might know someone, a former colleague who's brilliant but was laid off during restructuring. She might be perfect as your first employee." Jessica Park became employee number 1 of Jensen Tech Solutions the following week. A cybersecurity specialist with 10 years of experience, she'd been skeptical about working for a startup run by someone so young, but Sarah's technical knowledge quickly earned her respect. "Where did you learn to code like this?" Jessica asked one afternoon, reviewing Sarah's implementation plan for a new client. "Self-taught," Sarah replied simply, not elaborating on the countless sleepless nights that had made it possible. With Jessica handling some of the client work, Sarah could focus on business development and spending more quality time with Emily. She moved them to a spacious 2-bedroom apartment in a building with a playground and other young families. For the first time since Emily's birth, Sarah felt like they might be establishing something resembling a normal life. Then came the call that would transform Jensen Tech from a promising consultancy to an industry powerhouse. "Ms. Jensen, this is Craig Donovan, Chief Information Officer at Sheraton Hotels. We've experienced a security incident, and your name was recommended by several colleagues." The incident turned out to be a sophisticated attack that had compromised guest data at 17 Sheraton properties. Sarah spent 48 hours straight analyzing the breach, developing a mitigation strategy, and implementing emergency protocols. Emily stayed with the Kellers while Sarah worked through the night, subsisting on coffee and determination. When she finally presented her findings to Sheraton's executive team via video conference, their relief was palpable. "You've contained in 2 days what our internal team couldn't resolve in 2 weeks, Donovan said. "We'd like to offer you an exclusive security partnership agreement. 5 years, 7 figures. Sarah muted her microphone and pressed her hands against her mouth to stifle a scream of joy. After composing herself, she unmuted. "I'm very interested, Mr. Donovan. My legal team will review the proposal." Legal team was an overstatement. It was just the business attorney Richard had recommended, but within a month, Sarah had signed a $1.2 million contract with Sheraton. The industry took notice. By Emily's 3rd birthday, Jensen Tech Solutions had 8 employees and an actual office in Cambridge. "It's not exactly the corner office with the view," Sarah joked to Jessica as they unpacked boxes in the modest space, "but it's a start." "You know what this means, right?" Jessica replied, setting up a workstation. "You need to hire a proper CEO to scale the business, someone with experience growing tech companies." Sarah paused, a framed photo of Emily in her hands. "I am the CEO. You're the founder and the technical genius," Jessica corrected gently. "But you have no business background. To reach the next level, you need someone who understands corporate growth strategy." The suggestion stung, reminding Sarah of all the ways Maxwell had found her inadequate. But she swallowed her pride and recognized the wisdom in Jessica's words. 3 weeks later, she hired Thomas Reynolds, a veteran tech executive with multiple successful exits, as CEO. It was the best business decision she could have made. Under Thomas's guidance, Jensen Tech secured venture capital funding, expanded to 30 employees, and moved to larger offices with the downtown view Sarah had joked about. Thomas insisted that Sarah remain the face of the company as Chief Technology Officer, recognizing that her technical vision was their greatest asset. But Thomas's most valuable contribution came unexpectedly during a routine contract review. "Sarah, have you considered patenting your security framework?" he asked, examining the architecture diagrams for their hotel clients. "Patent it? It's just a solution I developed for Hilton that we've adapted for others." Thomas shook his head. "It's much more than that. You've created a unique approach to securing reservation systems that no one else has implemented. We should protect it." The Jensen Security Framework patent was approved 18 months later, just as Emily was starting preschool. The proprietary technology became the company's crown jewel, allowing them to charge premium rates for a solution no competitor could legally replicate. As the business thrived, Sarah remained deeply involved in Emily's development. When preschool teachers suggested that Emily might be gifted, Sarah arranged for professional assessment. The results confirmed what she had suspected. Emily's cognitive abilities tested at the level of a child nearly twice her age. "She needs more stimulation than a standard educational environment can provide," the educational psychologist explained. "Have you considered schools for gifted children?" By Emily's 4th birthday, Jensen Tech had 60 employees and had moved into a full floor of a prestigious office building overlooking Boston Harbor. Sarah had promoted Jessica to CTO, stepping back into a role as Chief Innovation Officer that allowed her more flexibility to support Emily's educational needs. The change in their lives was dramatic. The woman who once couldn't afford rent now drove a modest luxury car and owned a comfortable townhouse in a good school district. Emily attended an exclusive private school for gifted children, where she was thriving socially and academically. One rainy Tuesday morning, as Sarah dropped Emily off at school, her daughter asked a question that caught her off guard. "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like my friends?" Sarah knelt to eye level with her 4-year-old. "Some families have a mommy and daddy, some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies, and some, like ours, have just a mommy. All that matters is that you're loved." Emily seemed satisfied with the answer, skipping off to join her classmates. But the question haunted Sarah throughout the day. She had deliberately given Emily the last name Thompson, a private acknowledgement of her paternity that Sarah sometimes regretted. Sooner or later, Emily would ask more pointed questions. That evening, Sarah received news that momentarily pushed these concerns aside. Thomas had negotiated a security contract with Intercontinental Hotels Group, their largest deal yet, worth over $5 million annually. The contract would require hiring 20 more security specialists and expanding their office space again. "We're becoming a major player, Sarah," Thomas said during their celebration dinner. "The tech blogs are calling you a security savant. Investors are noticing." 6 months later, Jensen Tech Solutions reached 100 employees and moved into its own building in Cambridge's tech corridor. Sarah, now 29, found herself featured in Boston Business Journal's 30 Under 30 and invited to speak at major tech conferences. At one such conference, Sarah was approached by a representative from IBM after her presentation on evolving threats to the hospitality industry. "Ms. Jensen, our security division has been following your work with great interest," the executive said, handing her a business card. "We'd like to discuss acquisition possibilities." The following week, Sarah sat in a sleek conference room at IBM's Cambridge office, listening to their offer, $75 million for Jensen Tech Solutions, with a 3-year employment contract for Sarah as a principal security architect. "This is an exceptional valuation for a company your size," the IBM executive emphasized. "Most founders would jump at this opportunity." Sarah studied the offer document, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The scared, pregnant waitress sleeping in her car, the long nights studying while Emily slept, the risks she'd taken building her company from nothing. "I appreciate the offer," she said finally, "but I'm building a legacy, not a product to sell. Jensen Tech isn't for sale." The executive seemed stunned. "Perhaps you should discuss this with your board before making a decision." "I have majority control," Sarah replied calmly, "but I'll certainly inform them of my decision." On the drive home, Sarah couldn't help but smile. What would Maxwell think if he knew she had just turned down $75 million? The man who had offered her $5,000 to take care of the problem that was their child. As Jensen Tech celebrated its 5th anniversary with a company-wide party, Sarah stood before her now 150 employees, Emily at her side. "5 years ago, this company existed only in my imagination," she told the crowd. "Today, we protect the digital assets of 65% of the world's major hotel chains. Every one of you has contributed to building something that matters, a company that keeps people's personal information safe." The crowd raised their glasses in a toast. Emily, now 7 and dressed in a miniature business suit she had insisted on wearing to Mommy's work party, beamed with pride. Later that night, as Sarah tucked Emily into bed, her daughter asked, "Are you famous now, Mom? My teacher showed the class your picture in a magazine." Sarah laughed. "Not famous, sweetheart, just doing work that people find valuable." As Emily drifted off to sleep, Sarah opened her laptop to check the day's industry news. A headline caught her eye. "Thompson Hotels suffers major data breach. Customer information compromised." Sarah clicked on the article, her heart rate accelerating slightly. There, in a small photo accompanying the story, was Maxwell Thompson, looking older and more stressed than she remembered. The article detailed how thousands of guests' credit card information had been stolen through a vulnerability in the Thompson Hotel's reservation system. Ironically, it was exactly the kind of breach that the Jensen security framework had been designed to prevent, the same framework that Thompson Hotels had never inquired about, despite Sarah's company's growing reputation in the industry. "The Thompson Hotels could have avoided this with our protection," Sarah murmured to herself. "Ironic that they never reached out to us." She closed the laptop and gazed at her sleeping daughter, whose features increasingly resembled her father's. The breach was unfortunate for Thompson Hotels customers, but Sarah couldn't help feeling a twinge of satisfaction. Maxwell had once deemed her unworthy of his world, but now her expertise could have saved his company from embarrassment and financial loss. Observing the news about Thompson Hotels' problems, Sarah didn't know that fate was preparing an encounter that would shake the foundations of the empire Maxwell was struggling to maintain, and which she now had the power to either save or destroy. The news about Thompson Hotels' data breach lingered in Sarah's mind as she drove to the office the following morning. It was a stark reminder of the journey she had undertaken, from the woman Maxwell had discarded to someone whose expertise could have prevented his current troubles. The irony wasn't lost on her. Jensen Tech Solutions had outgrown its modest beginnings with breathtaking speed. In the 3 years since turning down IBM's acquisition offer, the company had expanded from a single floor to an entire building in Cambridge's tech corridor. The sleek glass facade reflected the morning sunlight as Sarah pulled into her reserved parking space, the words Jensen Tech Solutions prominently displayed across the entrance. "Good morning, Ms. Jensen," the security guard greeted her as she badged in. Inside, the transformation from struggling startup to industry leader was evident in every detail. The reception area featured modern furniture, soft lighting, and a digital wall displaying real-time visualizations of global cybersecurity threats. Where once there had been just Sarah and Jessica, now 50 analysts, developers, and security specialists filled the open workspace, their focused energy palpable. Sarah's assistant Miranda intercepted her at the elevator. "The quarterly report is ready for review. The board meets at 11. Oh, and People magazine called again about that Women Transforming Tech feature." "Tell them I'm still thinking about it," Sarah replied, stepping into her corner office with its panoramic view of the Boston skyline. At 30 years old, Sarah had grown into her role as a tech leader. Her wardrobe had evolved from thrift store basics to designer pieces that projected confidence and success. Today's Stella McCartney suit was a far cry from her old Denny's uniform. The morning management meeting showcased how far Jensen Tech had come. Department heads reported on ongoing projects, potential acquisitions, and market expansion opportunities. Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking penetrating questions that revealed her deep technical understanding. "Our next goal is 80% of the hotel security market," she announced as the meeting concluded. "We're currently at 65%. Who are we missing?" Jessica, now Chief Technology Officer, pulled up a slide. "Mainly Four Seasons, Wyndham, and Thompson Hotels. Four Seasons is considering our proposal. Wyndham is in talks. Thompson has rejected our outreach 3 times. 3 times? Sarah raised an eyebrow. They insist their internal solutions are sufficient, Miranda explained, passing Sarah a folder. Despite the recent breach that suggests otherwise. Sarah opened the folder, staring at the Thompson Hotel's logo. Her expression remained neutral, but a flicker of emotion crossed her eyes. Their decision. We can't save those who don't want help. That evening, Sarah left work early to attend a parent-teacher conference at the Beacon School, where 7-year-old Emily was now enrolled. The prestigious private institution catered to academically gifted children, its neo-Gothic architecture and ivy-covered walls projecting centuries of educational excellence. "Ms. Jensen, thank you for coming." Ms. Winters, Emily's math teacher, greeted her warmly. "I wanted to discuss Emily's exceptional performance." Sarah watched through the classroom window as Emily, unaware of her mother's presence, solved complex algebraic equations on a tablet. Around her, older students looked on with undisguised admiration. "She's completing work 3 to 4 grade levels above her age," Ms. Winters explained. "Her spatial reasoning and pattern recognition abilities are particularly remarkable. Have you considered having her IQ formally assessed?" "We did a preliminary evaluation when she was 4, Sarah replied. "The psychologist suggested waiting until she was older for a comprehensive assessment. I would strongly recommend it now. In 20 years of teaching, I've rarely encountered a mind like hers." Pride swelled in Sarah's chest as she watched her daughter. Emily had inherited her father's striking blue eyes and defined features, but her analytical mind and determination were all Sarah. Sometimes looking at Emily was like glimpsing an alternate reality. What might have been possible if Sarah had been given the educational opportunities her daughter now enjoyed. Later that night, as they sat at their dining table in their spacious townhouse, Emily picked at her broccoli with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, Tyler said his dad is taking him to Disney World for spring break, and Zoe is going to Paris with both her parents." Emily looked up, her blue eyes, so like Maxwell's, filled with innocent curiosity. "Why don't we ever talk about my dad? Everyone else knows who their dad is." The question, though expected, still caught Sarah off guard. She carefully set down her fork. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Your father wasn't ready to be a parent when you were born." "But why? Didn't he want me?" Sarah reached across the table to take her daughter's hand. "Sometimes people aren't who we think they are. He made choices that showed he wasn't prepared for family responsibilities." "What's his name? How did you meet him?" Sarah hesitated. "We met at the restaurant where I used to work, before I started my company." "Was he a cook or a customer?" "Emily, how about we finish dinner and then look at those science camp brochures? The application deadline is next week." The deflection worked temporarily, but Sarah knew the questions would return with increasing frequency. At some point, she would need to decide how much of the truth to share. Later that night, after Emily had gone to bed, Sarah sat alone in her home office, a glass of wine untouched beside her. She opened an old digital photo album stored in an encrypted folder, pictures from her time at Denny's. Most were group shots with co-workers, but one caught her eye, a blurry photo taken by a colleague showing Sarah laughing as she served coffee to a well-dressed customer. Though his face was partially turned away, she would recognize Maxwell's profile anywhere. A single tear slid down her cheek as she closed the album. The pain had dulled over the years, transformed into the fuel that drove her success, but it had never completely disappeared. The following week brought a milestone that momentarily distracted Sarah from these personal reflections. Jensen Tech celebrated the hiring of its 50th employee with a company-wide gathering. As founder and chief innovation officer, Sarah gave a speech that reflected her journey. 7 years ago, I was told I lacked the education, connections, and refinement to succeed in the business world, she said, not mentioning by whom. Today, we stand as proof that innovation and determination matter more than pedigree. Every person in this room is here because you bring exceptional value, regardless of where you started. The crowd applauded enthusiastically, unaware of the personal history behind her words. As champagne glasses clinked and employees celebrated, Sarah found herself watching from a quiet corner, struck by how far she had come from the desperate pregnant waitress sleeping in her car. The company's growth brought new challenges. As Jensen Tech expanded internationally, Sarah found herself traveling more frequently. Each trip required careful planning to minimize time away from Emily, who now attended a school for profoundly gifted children following an IQ assessment that had left even Sarah stunned. The evaluator said Emily's scores were off the charts, she told the Kellers during a Sunday dinner at their home. Richard, now retired and battling his own health issues, beamed with grandfatherly pride. "I'm not surprised," Elaine said, her hands now visibly affected by her progressing MS. That child was solving puzzles before she could properly talk. "The school psychologist thinks she might be ready for advanced placement classes in mathematics next year," Sarah added. "She's already talking about wanting to study computer science when she grows up." "Like mother, like daughter," Richard chuckled. The conversation shifted to business, with Richard asking about Jensen Tech's latest developments. Sarah mentioned their growing market share in hotel cybersecurity. "I saw in the news that Thompson Hotels had another breach," Richard remarked casually. "Worse than the first one, wasn't it?" Sarah nodded. "They've refused our services 3 times. Their CIO insists their internal team is sufficient." "Pride comes before a fall," Elaine murmured. That night, as Sarah tucked Emily into bed, her daughter asked her to explain what exactly her company did. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, attempting to translate complex cybersecurity concepts into terms a 7-year-old could understand. "Imagine a castle with treasure inside," she began. "Our company builds walls and moats to keep out dragons who want to steal the treasure." Emily's eyes widened. "Are there real dragons?" "Digital ones," Sarah smiled. "People who try to steal information, like credit card numbers, from hotels and other businesses." "Is that why you travel so much? To fight dragons?" "Exactly. And to teach other people how to fight them too." As Emily drifted off to sleep, Sarah checked her email one last time. A message from Jessica caught her attention. Attached article mentions Thompson Hotels again. Third breach in progress? Sources say Marriott considering acquisition. Sarah opened the attached news link. The headline blared, "Thompson Hotels faces crisis after second massive data breach in 3 years." Below it was a photo of Maxwell Thompson at a press conference, looking significantly older and more careworn than she remembered. The article detailed how customer confidence in the once prestigious hotel chain had plummeted, with occupancy rates down 30% and the stock price falling to a 5-year low. A notification from her calendar app reminded her of the upcoming Hospitality Technology Conference in Boston, where she was scheduled to be a keynote speaker. According to the agenda, executives from all major hotel chains would be present, including, she noted with a sudden tightness in her chest, the CEO of Thompson Hotels. The following morning, Sarah called an emergency meeting with her security team. "Thompson Hotels is facing another breach. Prepare a comprehensive emergency implementation plan." "But they've rejected our proposals 3 times, her director of sales protested. "They'll be desperate now," Sarah replied. "And desperation comes with a premium price tag." If they come to us this time, they'll pay triple our standard rate for urgent implementation." That evening, Emily was unusually quiet during dinner. Finally, she looked up from her plate with the determined expression Sarah recognized as a prelude to a difficult question. "Mom, why is my last name Thompson if yours is Jensen?" Sarah froze, fork suspended midway to her mouth. She'd never hidden Emily's legal surname. It appeared on school records and medical forms, but they had always used Jensen in daily life. "Thompson is your father's last name," she admitted carefully. "I gave it to you when you were born." "So somewhere there's a Mr. Thompson who's my dad?" "Yes." "Does he know about me?" Sarah set down her fork, choosing her words carefully. "He knows you exist, but he made it clear before you were born that he wasn't interested in being a father." Emily processed this information with the analytical focus that characterized her approach to everything. "Is he bad? Did he hurt you?" "He made choices that hurt us both," Sarah said truthfully. "But you don't need to worry about that. We've built a wonderful life together, haven't we?" Emily nodded, but Sarah could see the wheels turning in her daughter's mind. The questions would only become more specific as she grew older. Later that week, as Sarah reviewed Emily's perfect report card, she noticed how much her daughter's features resembled Maxwell's. The same determined set of the jaw, the same intense gaze when concentrating. It was like watching a feminine version of her former lover develop before her eyes. As she prepared for bed that night, Sarah's phone chimed with an email notification. Opening it, she read, "We are pleased to invite Sarah Jensen as the keynote speaker at the annual Hospitality Technology Conference in Boston next month." She stared at the invitation, imagining the possibility of coming face-to-face with Maxwell after all these years. What would he see when he looked at her? No longer the desperate waitress, but a successful technology leader whose company now protected the very industry his family had helped build. Accepting the invitation, Sarah didn't imagine that she was about to step onto a stage in front of the man who had once considered her worthless, a man whose company now desperately needed the help she could have offered years before. Sarah accepted the keynote invitation with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. After all these years of building her empire from the ground up, fate had engineered a collision course between her present success and the man who had once deemed her unworthy. As she closed her laptop, she wondered if Maxwell would even recognize the woman she had become. 3 months later, on a crisp spring morning, Sarah stood on the gleaming stage of the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. At 33, she had achieved what few tech founders ever would, taking her company public. The trading floor buzzed with excitement as investors and financial analysts watched the monitors, waiting for Jensen Tech's ticker symbol to appear. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, smoothing a wrinkle from Emily's blue dress. At 10 years old, Emily stood tall and poised beside her mother, her striking blue eyes, Maxwell's eyes, taking in the spectacle with precocious understanding. "I practiced the bell ringing at home with my science trophy," Emily replied seriously. "I won't mess it up." Sarah laughed, squeezing her daughter's shoulder. "Even if you did, it would still be perfect." The NASDAQ official approached with a microphone. "Ms. Jensen, would you like to say a few words before the opening bell?" Sarah stepped forward, her Armani suit a stark contrast to the thrift store clothes she'd once worn to her first MIT classes. 10 years ago, I was told I didn't have the education, connections, or refinement to succeed in the business world. Today, Jensen Tech Solutions proves that innovation doesn't care about your background. It cares about your vision and determination." As cameras flashed, Sarah and Emily approached the ceremonial button together. 3, 2, 1. The bell rang, and Jensen Tech officially began trading on the NASDAQ. On the massive screen overhead, their company logo appeared as shares opened at $32, well above the projected range. Applause thundered through the room as mother and daughter embraced. Sarah blinked back tears, thinking of the nights she'd studied while Emily slept in a crib beside her desk, the years of sacrifice and relentless work. In that moment, every hardship seemed worth it. "Ms. Jensen, your shares just jumped 4% in the first minute of trading," an analyst whispered, showing her his tablet. "Your personal net worth has just crossed $150 million. The number was staggering, incomprehensible to the woman who had once been grateful for a $5 tip at Denny's. Sarah simply nodded, keeping her composure as cameras continued to capture the historic moment. Back in Boston the following week, Sarah convened her expanded board of directors for their first post-IPO meeting. The boardroom, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River, housed executives from some of the most prestigious firms in the country. "Our next objective is 80% market share in the hotel cybersecurity sector," Sarah stated, advancing the presentation slide. "Currently, we're at 65%. The remaining targets are primarily Four Seasons, Wyndham, and Thompson hotels." Jessica, now Executive Vice President of Technology, pulled up market analysis data. Four Seasons is ready to sign. Wyndham is in final negotiations. That leaves Thompson Hotels as our primary holdout. Sarah's assistant entered discreetly, placing a note before her. "Thompson Hotels has rejected our proposal for the third time," she read aloud, keeping her expression neutral. "They maintain that their internal security solutions are adequate." "After two major breaches?" a board member scoffed. "That's either stubborn or stupid." "Their decision," Sarah replied, her tone professional despite the personal undercurrent that no one else in the room could detect. "We can't save those who refuse help." After the meeting, Sarah reviewed the quarterly projections in her office when Jessica knocked on her open door. "The Thompson Hotel's rejection feels personal," Jessica observed, dropping into a chair across from Sarah. "It's the third time they've refused even a consultation despite having the worst security record in the industry." Sarah kept her eyes on her tablet. "Some companies need to learn lessons the hard way." "Or some executives do," Jessica replied thoughtfully. "Their CEO, Thompson, has a reputation for being old school and resistant to outside expertise, especially from women." Sarah merely nodded, never having shared the truth about her history with Maxwell. Her personal rule had always been to keep her past private, focusing solely on the future she was building for herself and Emily. That evening, Sarah arrived home earlier than usual to attend Emily's piano recital. Their townhouse in Beacon Hill was warm and inviting, a far cry from the basement room they'd once shared at the Kellers. As she entered, Emily was practicing Bach's Minuet in G, her fingers moving confidently across the keys. "That sounds beautiful," Sarah said, setting down her briefcase. Emily beamed, her smile lighting up her face. "Mrs. Abramson says I might be ready for Chopin by next semester." She hesitated, then added, "Tyler's dad is flying in from London just for the recital tonight." Sarah recognized the unspoken question beneath her daughter's statement. "I've cleared my entire evening for your performance. Nothing could make me miss it." Later that night, after Emily had dazzled the audience with her musical talent, she brought up the subject that had become increasingly frequent in their conversations. "Why don't we ever talk about my father?" she asked as Sarah tucked her into bed. "Everyone else knows who their dad is." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "He wasn't ready to be a father when you were born, sweetheart. Some people aren't prepared for the responsibility of parenthood." "But doesn't he ever wonder about me? Doesn't he want to know what I'm like?" The innocent questions pierced Sarah's heart. How could she explain to her daughter that Maxwell Thompson had offered $5,000 to take care of the problem? That was Emily. "I believe he made his choice a long time ago," Sarah said gently. "But that doesn't define you, Emily. You are extraordinary in every way, and that has nothing to do with him." "Is that why my last name is Thompson? So I'd have something of his?" Sarah nodded, surprised by her daughter's perception. "Yes, I wanted you to have that connection, even if he chose not to be present." Emily seemed to process this, her analytical mind, so like Sarah's, working through the implications. Do you think he would be proud of me if he knew me? Anyone who knows you would be proud of you, Sarah answered truthfully. You are the most remarkable person I've ever met. The following morning, as Sarah reviewed Emily's latest school report, perfect grades across all subjects, she noted the psychologist's comments with a mixture of pride and concern. Emily continues to demonstrate exceptional cognitive abilities far beyond her peer group. Her recent IQ assessment places her in the extraordinarily gifted range. Recommend continued advanced placement and enrichment. Studying her daughter's school photo, Sarah couldn't help but see Maxwell's features becoming more prominent as Emily grew. The same determined set of the jaw, the intensity in her eyes when concentrating, the characteristic tilt of her head when considering a problem. It was like watching a feminine version of Maxwell develop before her eyes, but with Sarah's analytical mind and compassionate heart. 2 weeks later, Sarah attended a fundraising gala for women in technology, where she was being honored for her contributions to the field. As she accepted the award, a news alert buzzed on her phone. Glancing down discreetly, the headline caught her eye. Thompson Hotels suffers third major security breach. CEO faces board pressure. Reading the article later that night, Sarah learned that Thompson Hotels had experienced its most devastating data breach yet, compromising not only guest credit card information but also passport details and personal data of customers at 23 properties worldwide. The company's stock had plummeted, and rumors swirled about Maxwell Thompson being forced out as CEO. The following morning, Sarah called an emergency meeting with her security team. Prepare an analysis of the Thompson breach and develop a comprehensive rescue plan. If they come to us now, they'll be desperate. We should charge triple our standard implementation fee, her sales director suggested. Their negligence has been willful at this point. Agreed, Sarah nodded. But we'll also need to move quickly. A breach of this magnitude could permanently damage their brand. Later that week, as Sarah helped Emily prepare for an advanced mathematics competition, her daughter asked a question that caught her off guard. Mom, is Thompson Hotels named after our Thompson? Is that why you won't let them be your client? Sarah nearly dropped the flashcard she was holding. What makes you think that? I heard Jessica telling someone on the phone that you seem to have a blind spot about Thompson Hotels, Emily replied matter-of-factly, and I know they've had security problems that your company could fix. It seemed logical there might be a connection. Sarah sometimes forgot how perceptive her daughter was, how little escaped her notice. Thompson is a common name, sweetheart, and business decisions are complicated. Emily didn't seem entirely convinced, but returned her attention to the complex equations before her. That night, Sarah checked her email to find an invitation that made her breath catch. We are pleased to invite Sarah Jensen as the keynote speaker at the annual Hospitality Technology Conference in Boston next month. Your expertise in preventing the kind of security breaches recently experienced in our industry would be invaluable to attendees. Scanning the conference agenda, she found what she was both dreading and anticipating. Maxwell Thompson, CEO, Thompson Hotels, listed as a panelist for the session immediately following her keynote. After 12 years, she would finally come face-to-face with the man who had discarded her like yesterday's trash. The man whose words had both broken her and, ironically, set her on the path to extraordinary success. As she considered declining the invitation, her phone rang. It was Jessica. Sarah, have you seen the financial news? Marriott is in talks to acquire Thompson Hotels following their security disaster. The deal could be announced within weeks. Sarah sat back in her chair, processing this information. Who's handling the acquisition on Marriott's side? Craig Donovan, their CFO. The same Craig who's been trying to get us to expand our security contract with them. An idea formed in Sarah's mind, a perfect confluence of business opportunity and personal reckoning. Call Craig. Tell him I'd like to discuss an investment opportunity related to the Thompson acquisition. 2 days later, Sarah sat across from Marriott's CFO in a private dining room at the Four Seasons Boston. We'd be interested in acquiring a minority stake in Thompson Hotels as part of your deal, she explained, sliding a proposal across the table. Jensen Tech would purchase 26% of the company directly from you after the acquisition closes. Craig studied the document with raised eyebrows. This is unexpected, Sarah. May I ask why you'd want ownership in a hotel chain? It's outside your core business. Vertical integration? She replied smoothly. We provide security for most major hotel chains already. Having skin in the game with one of them gives us valuable operational insights. After 30 minutes of discussion, Craig nodded. I'll take this to my board. The terms seem favorable, and having Jensen Tech as a partner rather than just a vendor could be appealing. As Sarah drove home, she allowed herself a small smile. The waitress without prospects, without refinement, without value, would soon own a significant portion of the Thompson family legacy. The irony was almost too perfect. That evening, while reviewing the conference invitation again, Sarah made her decision. She would accept the keynote speaker role. It was time to close this chapter of her life, to stand on that stage as the industry leader she had become, before the man who had once deemed her unworthy of even basic human dignity. Accepting the invitation, Sarah didn't imagine that she was about to step onto a stage in front of the man who had once considered her worthless, a man whose company now desperately needed the help she could have offered years before. Sarah stared at the conference invitation on her screen, her finger hovering over the acceptance button. After 12 years of building herself up from nothing, she would finally stand on the same stage as the man who had once deemed her worthless. With a deep breath, she clicked "Accept" and closed her laptop. The following morning, Sarah arrived at Jensen Tech headquarters earlier than usual. Boston was just waking up, the sunrise painting the glass buildings in hues of gold and amber. Her corner office, once an impossible dream, now felt like a second home. As she reviewed her presentation for the upcoming conference, her assistant Miranda knocked on the door. The quarterly reports are ready, Miranda announced, placing a leather portfolio on Sarah's desk, and the PR team needs your approval on the conference bio. Sarah flipped through the proposed biography. Sarah Jensen, founder and chief innovation officer of Jensen Tech Solutions, revolutionized cybersecurity in the hospitality industry with her patented framework. Under her leadership, Jensen Tech protects 80% of major hotel chains worldwide and recently completed a successful IPO valued at over $1 billion. The stark contrast between this description and Maxwell's dismissive words from 12 years ago, "Too boring for my world," wasn't lost on her. Sarah made a few minor edits and handed the document back to Miranda. "Perfect timing," Miranda said. "The Marriott CFO is on line 1 about the Thompson Hotels acquisition." Sarah picked up the phone. "Craig, good morning. How's the deal progressing?" "Final paperwork is being drawn up now. The board approved your 26% stake purchase. Once we close next month, Jensen Tech will officially become a significant owner of Thompson Hotels." "Excellent. Send the documents to our legal team for review." After hanging up, Sarah turned her attention to her conference presentation. The title slide read, "The Future of Hospitality Security, Preventing the Next Catastrophic Breach." Without naming Thompson Hotels directly, every case study she included highlighted failures that mirrored their recent disasters. As the day progressed, Sarah found herself thinking about Emily, who would be performing in a piano recital the same evening as her keynote address. At 35, Sarah had mastered the delicate balance of being both a tech CEO and a devoted mother, though the juggling act was never easy. "I've arranged for Marcus to pick Emily up from school and take her to the recital," Miranda informed her, anticipating her concern. "You'll finish your keynote at 6:30, and the recital starts at 7:15. We've got a car waiting to take you directly there." "Thank you, Miranda. I've never missed one of her performances, and I don't intend to start now." Later that afternoon, Sarah met with her presentation team to finalize the visuals for her keynote. As they reviewed slides showing the devastating financial impact of security breaches, Jessica pointed to a particularly alarming statistic. This one's from Thompson's latest disaster. 93 million in immediate damages, not counting the stock devaluation and brand damage. Sarah nodded. Included, but remove the company name. They'll know exactly who we're talking about. Speaking of Thompson, Jessica said carefully, the conference participant list came through. Maxwell Thompson is confirmed to attend your keynote. Sarah maintained her composure, but her heart rate accelerated slightly. Interesting. Make sure our latest white paper on hospitality security is included in all attendee folders. Perhaps Thompson Hotels will finally recognize what they've been missing. That evening, Sarah arrived home to find Emily practicing intensely for her upcoming recital. At 12, Emily Thompson was the spitting image of her father. The same striking blue eyes, the same defined jawline, the same intensity when focused on a task. But her analytical mind and determination were all Sarah. "That sounds beautiful," Sarah said, leaning against the doorframe. Emily looked up, her fingers pausing over the keys. "Mrs. Chen says my interpretation has improved, but I still need to work on the emotional dynamics." "You'll be perfect," Sarah assured her, joining her daughter on the piano bench. "I've arranged everything so I can make it to your recital, even with my conference speech that evening." Emily's expression brightened. "Will you wear the blue Prada suit? It matches your eyes." "I was thinking the Armani, more authoritative for a keynote." "The Prada makes you look powerful and beautiful at the same time," Emily countered with the confident logic that characterized all her arguments. Sarah laughed. "Prada it is then." As they prepared dinner together, a ritual Sarah insisted on maintaining despite her demanding schedule, Emily broached the subject that had become increasingly common in their conversations. "I looked up Thompson Hotels online today," she said casually, chopping vegetables with practiced precision. "They're having problems because of data breaches. Isn't that what your company prevents?" Sarah measured her response carefully. "Yes, that's exactly what we prevent. Thompson Hotels has declined our services several times over the years." "That seems like a poor business decision," Emily observed. "Their stock has dropped 47% in 18 months, according to Bloomberg." Sarah sometimes forgot just how precocious her daughter was. At 12, Emily was already reading financial news and understanding complex market dynamics. "The best business leaders are sometimes blinded by pride," she explained. "They can't accept help, even when they desperately need it." "Is that why they're being bought by Marriott? Because they failed?" Sarah nearly dropped the spatula she was holding. "Where did you hear that?" "It was on your tablet this morning when you asked me to check the weather," Emily replied matter-of-factly. The headline was pretty clear about the acquisition talks. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Sarah reviewed her conference notes one final time. The event was just 3 days away. 12 years had passed since Maxwell had written that cruel letter, dismissing her as someone who barely afford rent in Cicero and offering $5,000 to take care of their unborn child. Now, she would stand before him as a billionaire tech founder, and soon a part owner of his family's struggling empire. The irony wasn't lost on her, but Sarah took no pleasure in Maxwell's downfall. What she had built wasn't about revenge, it was about proving to herself and to Emily that determination could overcome any obstacle. The morning of the conference dawned crisp and clear. Sarah's preparations were meticulous. From her perfectly tailored Prada suit, Emily had been right about the color, to the polished slides of her presentation. As her driver navigated through Boston's morning traffic, she reviewed her speaker notes one final time. "The car will wait for you throughout the event," her assistant confirmed via text, ready to take you directly to Emily's recital afterward. The Boston Convention Center was imposing, a massive glass structure filled with the industry's most influential leaders. As Sarah entered through the VIP entrance, she was immediately greeted by the conference organizer. "Ms. Jensen, we're honored to have you as our keynote. Your session is already overbooked. We've had to add extra seating." Sarah smiled professionally. I'm glad there's so much interest in cybersecurity. It's often overlooked until disaster strikes. In the green room, Sarah politely declined coffee, preferring to stay focused without caffeine jitters. As she reviewed her notes one final time, the door opened, and the conference director entered with another man. Ms. Jensen, this is Marcus Woodbridge, CIO of Hilton. He specifically requested to meet you before your talk. Sarah stood to shake his hand, but her peripheral vision caught something that made her pause. Through the partially open door, she glimpsed a familiar profile in the hallway. Maxwell Thompson was speaking with another executive, unaware of her presence just feet away. Even from this distance, she could see that the years had not been entirely kind to him. His once jet-black hair was now streaked with silver, and the confident posture she remembered had given way to a slight stoop of the shoulders. "Ms. Jensen, are you all right?" Marcus Woodbridge asked, noticing her momentary distraction. "Perfectly fine," Sarah replied smoothly, turning her attention back to the conversation. "I was just mentally reviewing a point from my presentation." 20 minutes later, Sarah was introduced to the packed auditorium. As she walked onto the stage, the applause was deafening. Over 2,000 executives, security specialists, and industry leaders filling every seat. From her position at the podium, she could see Maxwell Thompson in the front row, his attention initially on his phone rather than the stage. "Thank you for that warm welcome," Sarah began, her voice strong and clear over the sound system. "Today we're going to discuss how the hospitality industry can protect its most valuable asset, customer trust." As she advanced through her slides, Sarah noted the exact moment Maxwell recognized her. His head snapped up from his phone, eyes narrowing in confusion, then widening in shock. The color drained from his face as 12 years of history collapsed into a single moment of recognition. Sarah continued her presentation flawlessly, discussing advanced security protocols and emerging threats, all while feeling Maxwell's stunned gaze fixed upon her. With each point she made, with each example of a preventable breach, she could see him shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "The cost of inadequate security isn't just financial," she explained, advancing to a slide showing catastrophic losses. "When customers lose faith in your ability to protect their data, they lose faith in your brand. Some companies never recover from that breach of trust." The irony of her words, speaking about breaches of trust to the man who had betrayed her so completely, gave her presentation an intensity that captivated the audience. For 70 minutes, Sarah commanded the stage with authority and expertise that left no doubt about her position as an industry leader. When she finished, the standing ovation was immediate and enthusiastic. As attendees crowded around her with questions and business cards, Sarah caught glimpses of Maxwell hovering at the periphery, clearly wanting to approach but hesitant to join the throng of admirers. Finally, as the crowd thinned during the networking break, he made his move. "A truly impressive presentation, Ms. Jensen," he said, his voice carrying the forced confidence of someone trying to hide their discomfort. "I don't know if you remember me." When their eyes met, time seemed to stand still. The busy convention center with its hundreds of attendees faded into background noise. Sarah maintained perfect composure, though her hand tightened almost imperceptibly around her water glass. "Maxwell Thompson. Of course I remember. It's difficult to forget someone who considered me—" She paused delicately. "What was the phrase? Ah, yes, too boring for your world." The blood drained from his face as several nearby executives glanced their way curiously. "Sarah, could we speak privately? I have interest in Jensen Tech services for our chain." "Interesting," Sarah replied, her professional smile never reaching her eyes. "According to our analysts, Thompson Hotels won't have the financial capacity for our premium package after the Marriott acquisition closes next quarter." She took a measured sip of water. "But feel free to schedule with my team. We have a waiting list of approximately 6 months." Before Maxwell could respond, Sarah's phone rang. Glancing at the screen, her expression transformed from cool professionalism to alarm. "What do you mean an emergency at the Four Seasons? Is Emily okay?" The mention of her daughter's name froze Maxwell in place. "Emily?" he repeated softly, the name clearly resonating with him. Sarah ended the call quickly, already gathering her belongings. "Excuse me, I need to go. Family emergency." As she hurried toward the exit, she could feel Maxwell's eyes following her, the pieces beginning to fall into place in his mind. While accepting the keynote invitation, Sarah hadn't imagined that the fate was preparing an encounter far more surprising than the one she'd just experienced, one where Emily, without knowing, would cross paths with the father she had never met. Sarah hurried through the convention center, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor as she pushed through the crowd of industry executives. The normally composed CEO was visibly shaken, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Behind her, Maxwell Thompson stood frozen, the name Emily echoing in his mind like a distant bell he couldn't quite place. Outside, Sarah's driver already had the Tesla door open. "Four Seasons, quickly," she instructed, her voice tense as she slid into the back seat. During the short drive, she called the hotel again, her knuckles white around the phone. "This is Sarah Jensen. My daughter Emily. Yes, I'm on my way." Meanwhile, the conference attendees were filing back into the main hall for the next session. Maxwell Thompson moved mechanically toward his designated spot on the panel, his mind elsewhere. The woman he had just encountered was unrecognizable as the waitress he'd dismissed 12 years ago. Gone was the uncertain girl in the cheap uniform, replaced by a commanding presence in designer clothes who now controlled the very technology his company desperately needed. And she had mentioned Emily. A coincidence? Or something more significant? The Tesla pulled up to the Four Seasons' elegant entrance. Sarah was out before the car fully stopped, striding through the revolving doors with the authority of someone accustomed to immediate attention. "Ms. Jensen?" The hotel manager intercepted her, relief visible on his face. "This way, please." He led her to a quiet corner of the lobby where Emily sat on a plush sofa, wrapped in a hotel blanket. A security guard stood nearby while two paramedics were packing up their equipment. "Mom!" Emily brightened, her blue eyes, so like Maxwell's, lighting up at the sight of Sarah. Sarah rushed to her daughter, kneeling to examine her. "Are you hurt? What happened?" "I'm fine, really," Emily insisted. "I was just at the library across the street and decided to wait here instead of at school. Then I saw this man, a thief, grab another man's briefcase and run. I shouted for security and pointed which way he went." The hotel manager stepped forward. "Your daughter's quick thinking prevented the theft of some extremely valuable documents." The guest was tremendously grateful. "It wasn't a big deal," Emily shrugged modestly. "The security guards did the actual catching." Sarah exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "You could have been hurt, Emily. What if the thief had been armed?" "I stayed behind the fountain," Emily explained logically. "I calculated a safe distance while maintaining visual contact." Despite her worry, Sarah couldn't help but smile at her daughter's analytical approach to danger, so like her own way of thinking. "Ms. Jensen," the manager continued, "the guest whose property your daughter saved has specifically requested to thank her personally. He's just finishing a statement with security." "Of course," Sarah nodded, still holding Emily's hand. "We can wait a few minutes." Emily leaned forward, her expression brightening. "He already invited me to dinner as a thank you, said I could order anything from the menu. Can we stay, Mom? Please? I know you had your big speech, but this was kind of an adventure." Sarah hesitated, checking her watch. They could still make the recital if they left within the hour. "I suppose we could have an early dinner." The sound of approaching footsteps made Sarah look up. Her blood froze in her veins. Maxwell Thompson stood at the entrance to the lobby, speaking with the security chief. He hadn't noticed them yet, still reviewing what appeared to be a police report. "That's him," Emily whispered excitedly, pointing. "The man whose briefcase I saved. He said his name is Mr. Thompson, and he owns hotels." Sarah felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her. Of all the scenarios she had imagined for Maxwell potentially meeting Emily, this accidental encounter had never crossed her mind. Maxwell finished with security and turned, his eyes scanning the lobby until they landed on Emily. A smile spread across his face as he approached, only to falter when he recognized Sarah sitting beside her. He stopped abruptly, color draining from his face for the second time that day. "You," he said simply, his voice barely audible. "Mr. Thompson," Emily called, waving him over, oblivious to the tension. "This is my mom. She's the one who gave the keynote speech at your conference today." Maxwell approached slowly as though walking through quicksand. "Yes, we've met." The silence that followed was deafening, laden with 12 years of unspoken history. Sarah recovered first, her professional mask sliding firmly into place. "Mr. Thompson," she acknowledged with a slight nod, "it seems my daughter helped you today." "She did more than help," Maxwell replied, his eyes moving between Sarah and Emily with growing realization. "She prevented the theft of documents crucial to our Marriott negotiations. Without them, the deal might have collapsed." Emily beamed at the praise. "I still want to be a programmer like Mom, but crime fighting was kind of exciting." Maxwell couldn't tear his gaze away from Emily's face, studying her features with an intensity that would have seemed inappropriate had Sarah not understood exactly what he was seeing. His own eyes, his own jawline, his own expressions reflected back in this child he'd never known existed. "Your mother must be very proud," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "She is," Emily confirmed. "So, about that thank you dinner? Mom said we could stay if we're quick. I have a piano recital tonight." "Piano?" Maxwell repeated faintly, another piece of information that seemed to hit him physically. "I played piano as a child." Sarah stood, placing a protective hand on Emily's shoulder. "We should probably go, Emily. The recital—" "Please," Maxwell interrupted, his eyes meeting Sarah's with an intensity that held her in place. "Allow me to thank you both properly. It's the least I can do." The restaurant within the Four Seasons was elegant and subdued, with soft lighting and immaculate white tablecloths. They were seated at a private corner table, Maxwell and Sarah facing each other with Emily between them, a physical manifestation of their connection and division. Tension hummed between the adults while Emily, blissfully unaware, chatted animatedly about her school, her programming projects, and her music. Maxwell barely touched his water, transfixed by every word from the daughter he never knew he had. "Senor Thompson, did you build all those hotels yourself?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with curiosity as she carefully cut her steak. Maxwell smiled, his first genuine expression since recognizing Sarah. "Not personally, no. My grandfather started the company, and my father expanded it. I've been trying to maintain their legacy." "My mom built her company from scratch," Emily announced proudly. "We started in a tiny apartment in Cambridge when I was 2. Now she has 470 employees," Sarah observed as Maxwell struggled to maintain his composure, his eyes repeatedly drawn to Emily's features, studying the shape of her nose, the arch of her eyebrows, the way she tilted her head when asking a question, all reflections of himself. "Emily is a beautiful name," he said suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. "Did you choose it for any particular reason?" Sarah met his gaze steadily, her expression revealing nothing. "It was your grandmother's name. I thought it would be appropriate since it's the only connection she would have with that side of the family." The silence that followed was crushing. Maxwell's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass, the implication of her words landing like a physical blow. Emily, sensing the shift in atmosphere but misinterpreting its cause, tried to lighten the mood. "Senor Thompson, do you have children?" Maxwell set down his glass carefully, his eyes never leaving Sarah's. "Unfortunately not, Emily. It's one of my greatest regrets." The naked honesty in his voice momentarily cracked Sarah's composed exterior. For a fleeting second, pain and old anger flashed across her face before she controlled her expression once more. "That's too bad," Emily replied sympathetically. "My mom says she doesn't need a man because she already has everything she needs, but I think it would be nice to have a dad." Sarah nearly choked on her water, while Maxwell's knuckles whitened around his fork. The innocent comment landed like a grenade between them, exploding silently with the force of everything unsaid. Before either adult could respond, a distinguished older man approached their table. "Sarah, what a delightful surprise," he exclaimed warmly. Sarah looked up, grateful for the interruption. "Craig, Emily, this is Mr. Donovan, the Chief Financial Officer of Marriott Hotels." Craig Donovan nodded politely to Emily before turning to Maxwell with a somewhat cooler expression. "Thompson, didn't expect to see you here. We were just finalizing some details about the acquisition with your legal team." Emily's eyes widened with interest. "Thompson Hotels is being sold?" An uncomfortable silence descended on the table. Maxwell shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable having business matters discussed in front of a child, especially this child. "Yes, sweetie," Sarah explained, her tone deliberately casual. "Mr. Thompson's company has unfortunately faced difficulties after the security breaches I mentioned in my presentation today." The subtle twist of the knife was not lost on Maxwell, whose jaw tightened visibly. "Ironic, isn't it?" Sarah continued, her smile professional but her eyes cold as she addressed Craig. "If Thompson Hotels had contracted our protection 5 years ago when we first offered it, perhaps they'd be in position to buy Marriott now, rather than the other way around." Maxwell's face paled further as the full impact of her words registered. Not just the professional failure she was highlighting, but the personal parallel she was drawing. If he had accepted Sarah and their child years ago rather than discarding them, how different might all their lives be now? Craig, sensing the tension but misreading its source as merely business rivalry, chuckled awkwardly. "Well, water under the bridge now. The papers will be signed next week, and Thompson Hotels will become part of the Marriott family." "Just like that?" Emily asked, looking at Maxwell with unexpected sympathy. "Your whole company that your grandfather built just goes away?" Maxwell met the girl's compassionate gaze, his own eyes looking back at him, and something inside him seemed to crack. "Nothing lasts forever, Emily, especially when we make poor decisions." As Craig excused himself, Sarah checked her watch. "We need to leave for your recital, Emily. It starts in 30 minutes. "Can Mr. Thompson come too?" Emily asked impulsively. "Since I saved his papers and everything?" The question hung in the air between them. Maxwell looked at Sarah, not daring to speak, waiting for her decision. "I'm afraid Mr. Thompson has business matters to attend to," Sarah replied smoothly. "But thank you for the dinner, Maxwell. It was illuminating." As they prepared to leave, Maxwell reached into his pocket and handed Emily a business card. "If you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call me." Sarah watched this exchange with a guarded expression, saying nothing but not interfering. Emily tucked the card into her pocket with a bright smile. "Thank you for dinner, Senor Thompson. I hope you find someone to fix your hotel's security problems." As Sarah and Emily walked away, Maxwell remained at the table, watching them go. The physical resemblance between himself and the child was unmistakable. Anyone who knew him would recognize it immediately. Yet for 12 years, he had been completely unaware of her existence. While Sarah helped Emily into their waiting car, she didn't notice Maxwell Thompson entering the hotel lobby, his face pale with shock as he finally connected all the dots about the blue-eyed girl who had saved his briefcase and who bore his name. Maxwell Thompson stood frozen in the hotel lobby, his world fundamentally altered. The girl who had just left with Sarah Jensen was unmistakably his daughter. Those eyes, his eyes, staring back at him from a face that combined his features with Sarah's intelligence. Emily Thompson, named after his grandmother, his child. The realization hit him with physical force, causing him to steady himself against a marble column. For 12 years he had built his empire, dated socialites, expanded his family's legacy, all while completely unaware that he had a daughter. A brilliant, articulate daughter who had just saved his company's acquisition documents without having any idea who he was. The following morning dawned crisp and clear over Boston. Maxwell arrived at the Jensen Tech headquarters building 45 minutes before normal business hours. He had barely slept, spending the night researching everything he could find about Sarah Jensen and her meteoric rise in the tech industry. The more he discovered, the more a sickening realization settled in his stomach. The woman he had discarded as too boring for his world had built something extraordinary without him. The security guard at the reception desk eyed him skeptically. "Jensen Tech doesn't open until 8:30, sir. I need to see Sarah Jensen. It's urgent." "Do you have an appointment?" Maxwell straightened his custom-tailored suit jacket. "No, but she'll want to see me. I'm Maxwell Thompson." The name that had opened doors throughout his life carried no special weight here. The guard checked his computer and shrugged. "Not on the visitor list. You'll have to come back later or schedule through proper channels." For nearly an hour, Maxwell waited in the lobby, watching as employees began filtering in. Young, diverse, energetic, they passed through security with purpose, many wearing casual clothes that would never be permitted in his corporate offices. This was a different world, one built on merit rather than tradition. At precisely 8:15, Sarah's Tesla pulled into her reserved parking space. Maxwell watched through the glass doors as she exited the car, her Prada suit a stark contrast to his memory of her in the cheap Denny's uniform. She moved with confidence, purpose, the bearing of someone who answered to no one. Their eyes met through the glass. Sarah's step faltered almost imperceptibly before she composed herself and proceeded through the doors. "Mr. Thompson is waiting for you," the security guard informed her. "No appointment." Sarah's expression revealed nothing. "5 minutes, Maxwell. It's all I have." The elevator ride to her office was silent, charged with 12 years of unspoken history. Maxwell noted how employees nodded respectfully as Sarah passed, how the space had been designed to reflect innovation rather than tradition. This was her domain, built entirely without his help or influence. Sarah's corner office featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Awards and patents lined one wall, while family photos, all of Sarah and Emily, adorned another. She took her seat behind a modernist desk, gesturing for him to sit across from her. 5 minutes, she repeated, her voice coolly professional. Maxwell leaned forward, his composure cracking. "Emily is my daughter, isn't she? Why did you never tell me? Why didn't you ask for child support? Financial assistance? Anything?" Sarah's laugh contained no humor, a sharp, bitter sound that seemed to slice the air between them. "Child support? You left me a letter, Maxwell. A letter and $5,000 to take care of the problem. You made it abundantly clear that I didn't deserve your time or consideration. I tried to contact you after—" "No," Sarah cut him off sharply. "You disappeared completely, changed your number, blocked my emails. When I tried to find you at your office to show you the ultrasound, your lawyer threatened me with a restraining order. Don't rewrite history now that it suits you." Maxwell ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair, the weight of his actions settling on him like a physical burden. "I was young and stupid, Sarah. I made the worst mistake of my life." "No, Maxwell." Sarah's voice was precise, controlled. "You were a 32-year-old man who calculatedly decided that a pregnant waitress would damage your image. And now, ironically, you're CEO of a collapsing company being saved by an acquisition negotiated by the same woman you considered, without refinement, for your world." The brutal accuracy of her assessment left him momentarily speechless. Through the window behind her, he could see his family's hotel in the distance, soon to be absorbed by Marriott, its identity erased after 3 generations. "I want to know my daughter," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want to be part of her life. I can offer—" "Offer what, exactly?" Sarah interrupted. "Emily has a $30 million investment fund securing her future. She attends the best school in the country. She travels the world with me. She has love, security, and examples of integrity surrounding her. I have legal rights. Actually, you don't." Sarah opened a drawer and removed a folder, sliding a document across the desk. "12 years ago, your lawyer sent me this. A formal renunciation of any paternal rights, signed by you, with the threat that if I caused problems, I would face legal consequences. Were you so desperate to get rid of me that you didn't even read what you signed?" Maxwell examined the document with growing horror, recognizing his signature at the bottom. The legal language was explicit. He had signed away all rights to any child resulting from his relationship with Sarah Jensen. "Sarah, I'm begging you," his voice cracked. "She saved my life yesterday, literally. That briefcase contained the only documents that could save Thompson Hotels from complete bankruptcy. It must be fate." "Fate?" Sarah rose from her chair, imposing in her Valentino suit. "Fate was me sleeping in a car while carrying your child. Fate was me cleaning offices with morning sickness to pay for programming courses. Fate was every moment I had to explain to Emily why she didn't have a father like other children." Maxwell's face crumpled. The confident CEO, the man accustomed to commanding rooms and closing deals worth millions, looked utterly defeated. A voice interrupted through the intercom. "Ms. Jensen, the Marriott board is on the line. They want to confirm if you still wish to exercise your purchase option for Thompson Hotels shares after the acquisition." Maxwell froze. "Purchase option?" Sarah's smile contained no warmth. "Yes, Maxwell. Jensen Tech is acquiring 26% of Thompson Hotels as part of the deal with Marriott. I will effectively be your boss in a few weeks." The irony was staggering. The waitress with no future would now control a significant portion of the empire he had once considered too prestigious to include her. "As for Emily," Sarah continued, resuming her seat, "I will tell her the truth when she turns 18. It will be her decision whether she wants to know you or not. Until then, you may observe her from a distance as the Good Samaritan whose briefcase she saved." "And if I make this public? Reveal that I have a daughter?" Sarah's serene smile never wavered. "Then you'll explain to the press and your shareholders why you abandoned a pregnant woman and renounced your paternal rights, only to try reappearing when you discovered she built an empire larger than yours." The checkmate was absolute. Maxwell stood slowly, his usual commanding presence diminished by the truth of his past actions. "I never meant to hurt you, Sarah. That's your problem, Maxwell. You never considered that I could be truly hurt because you never saw me as completely human. I was disposable, a waitress with no prospects. Now please leave my office. I have a conference call with investors in Tokyo." Maxwell moved toward the door, then paused. "Emily mentioned a piano recital last night. Did she play well?" Something softened fractionally in Sarah's expression. "She was magnificent. She has a natural talent for music." "Like my mother," Maxwell whispered, almost to himself. "Yes," Sarah acknowledged, "among other inherited traits." As the door closed behind him, Maxwell stood in the hallway, surrounded by the empire Sarah had built from nothing. Young employees hurried past, paying him no attention. Just another middle-aged executive in an expensive suit, unremarkable in their world of innovation. That evening, Maxwell sat alone in his suite at the Four Seasons, staring at the final acquisition papers from Marriott. The sale would be announced publicly tomorrow, the end of his family's independent legacy. On the television, muted financial news showed a graph of Thompson Hotels' declining stock value juxtaposed against Jensen Tech's meteoric rise. He opened his laptop and searched for Emily Thompson. There was little online presence for a 12-year-old, but he found a newspaper article about a regional mathematics competition. In the group photo of winners, Emily stood in the center, holding a trophy nearly as big as herself. His mother's eyes, stared back at him from the screen. Across town, Sarah and Emily shared dinner in their penthouse apartment, discussing Emily's upcoming science competition. "Mom, that man we met yesterday, Mr. Thompson, seemed sad," Emily observed, twirling pasta around her fork. "Like he lost something important." Sarah studied her daughter, confident, brilliant, compassionate, and answered gently, "Sometimes, Emily, people only realize the value of what they had when it's already too late." "Well, I hope he finds whatever he lost," Emily commented innocently. Sarah reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. Some treasures, when lost by choice, never can be recovered. As Emily chattered about her science project, Sarah glanced at her phone. A news alert announced the finalized acquisition of Thompson Hotels by Marriott International. A smaller note mentioned that technology security firm Jensen Tech would acquire a significant minority stake in the restructured company. The waitress without prospects now owned part of the empire that had once been deemed too good for her. But looking at her daughter's animated face, Sarah knew that her greatest victory had nothing to do with business acquisitions or revenge. Her triumph was in raising this extraordinary child, a gift that Maxwell Thompson had foolishly rejected and would never truly know. While Maxwell Thompson signed away the last pieces of his family legacy alone in his hotel suite, Sarah and Emily laughed together over dessert, their bond unbreakable, the greatest treasure that no man could ever claim. The morning after their dinner at the Four Seasons, Maxwell Thompson stood in the elegant lobby of Jensen Tech's headquarters building. He had arrived at 7:30, determined to speak with Sarah before she became surrounded by her team. The night had been sleepless, his mind replaying every moment of the unexpected encounter with Emily, his daughter, and the devastating realization of what his arrogance had cost him. The modern glass building reflected the early morning sunlight, the words Jensen Tech Solutions emblazoned across the entrance in sleek, confident lettering. So different from the traditional stone facade of Thompson Hotel's headquarters with its century-old family crest. This building represented the future. His represented a past that was slipping away. The security guard eyed him with professional detachment. "Can I help you, sir?" "I need to see Sarah Jensen," Maxwell said, straightening his custom Italian suit. Once, his name alone would have granted him immediate access anywhere. "Tell her Maxwell Thompson is here." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but this is urgent." The guard made a call, speaking quietly before turning back to Maxwell. "Ms. Jensen will see you. 5th-minute wait." Those 5 minutes stretched eternally as Maxwell paced the lobby, watching Jensen Tech employees arrive. Young, diverse, casually dressed yet focused, so different from the formal, traditional staff at his hotels. This was a company built on innovation rather than heritage, on merit rather than connections. When Sarah finally appeared, stepping out of the elevator with regal composure, Maxwell was struck again by the transformation. Her tailored designer suit and confident stride bore no resemblance to the nervous waitress who had once served him coffee. Her expression revealed nothing as she approached. 5 minutes, Maxwell. That's all I have." The elevator ride to her office was silent, the tension between them thick enough to touch. Maxwell noted how employees nodded respectfully as they passed Sarah in the hallway. This was her domain, built without any help from him, a thought that twisted uncomfortably in his stomach. Sarah's corner office offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. Awards and patents lined one wall, while family photos, all of Sarah and Emily at various ages, adorned another. She took her seat behind a modernist desk, gesturing for him to sit across from her. 5 minutes, she repeated, her voice coolly professional. Maxwell leaned forward, his carefully maintained facade cracking. "Emily is my daughter, isn't she? Why did you never tell me? Why didn't you ask for child support, financial assistance, anything?" Sarah's laugh held no humor, a sharp, bitter sound that sliced through the air between them. "Child support? You left me a letter, Maxwell. A letter and $5,000 to take care of the problem. You made it abundantly clear that I didn't deserve your time or consideration. I tried to contact you afterward. No, Sarah cut him off sharply. You disappeared completely, changed your number, blocked my emails. When I tried to find you at your office to show you the ultrasound, your lawyer threatened me with a restraining order. Her eyes flashed with old pain. Don't rewrite history now that it suits you. Maxwell ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. I was young and stupid, Sarah. I made the worst mistake of my life. No, Maxwell. Sarah's voice was precise, controlled. You were a 32-year-old man who calculatedly decided that a pregnant waitress would damage your image. And now, ironically, you're CEO of a collapsing company being saved by an acquisition negotiated by the same woman you considered without refinement for your world. The brutal accuracy of her assessment left him momentarily speechless. Through the window behind her, he could see his family's hotel in the distance, soon to be absorbed by Marriott, its identity erased after 3 generations. I want to know my daughter, he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. I want to be part of her life. I can offer what exactly? Sarah interrupted. Emily has a $30 million investment fund securing her future. She attends the best school in the country. She travels the world with me. She has love, security, and examples of integrity surrounding her. I have legal rights. Actually, you don't. Sarah opened a drawer and removed a folder, sliding a document across the desk. 12 years ago, your lawyer sent me this. A formal renunciation of any paternal rights, signed by you, with the threat that if I caused problems, I would face legal consequences. Were you so desperate to get rid of me that you didn't even read what you signed? Maxwell examined the document with growing horror, recognizing his signature at the bottom. The legal language was explicit. He had signed away all rights to any child resulting from his relationship with Sarah Jensen. Sarah, I'm begging you, his voice cracked. She saved my life yesterday, literally. That briefcase contained the only documents that could save Thompson Hotels from complete bankruptcy. It must be fate. Fate? Sarah rose from her chair, imposing in her Valentino suit. Fate was me sleeping in a car while carrying your child. Fate was me cleaning offices with morning sickness to pay for programming courses. Fate was every moment I had to explain to Emily why she didn't have a father like other children. The intercom on Sarah's desk buzzed. Ms. Jensen, the Marriott board is on the line. They want to confirm if you still wish to exercise your purchase option for Thompson Hotels shares after the acquisition. Maxwell froze. Purchase option? Sarah's smile contained no warmth. Yes, Maxwell. Jensen Tech is acquiring 26% of Thompson Hotels as part of the deal with Marriott. I will effectively be your boss in a few weeks. The irony was staggering. The waitress with no future would now control a significant portion of the empire he had once considered too prestigious to include her. As for Emily, Sarah continued, resuming her seat, I will tell her the truth when she turns 18. It will be her decision whether she wants to know you or not. Until then, you may observe her from a distance as the Good Samaritan whose briefcase she saved. And if I make this public? Reveal that I have a daughter? Sarah's serene smile never wavered. Then you'll explain to the press and your shareholders why you abandoned a pregnant woman and renounced your paternal rights, only to try reappearing when you discovered she built an empire larger than yours. The checkmate was absolute. Maxwell stood slowly, his usual commanding presence diminished by the truth of his past actions. I never meant to hurt you, Sarah. That's your problem, Maxwell. You never considered that I could be truly hurt, because you never saw me as completely human. I was disposable, a waitress with no prospects. She glanced at her watch. Now please leave my office. I have a conference call with investors in Tokyo. Maxwell moved toward the door, then paused. Emily mentioned a piano recital last night. Did she play well? Something softened fractionally in Sarah's expression. She was magnificent. She has a natural talent for music. Like my mother, Maxwell whispered, almost to himself. Yes, Sarah acknowledged. Among other inherited traits. As the door closed behind him, Maxwell stood in the hallway, surrounded by the empire Sarah had built from nothing. Young employees hurried past, paying him no attention. Just another middle-aged executive in an expensive suit, unremarkable in their world of innovation. That evening, Maxwell sat alone in his suite at the Four Seasons, staring at the final acquisition papers from Marriott. The sale would be announced publicly tomorrow, the end of his family's independent legacy. On the television, muted financial news showed a graph of Thompson Hotel's declining stock value juxtaposed against Jensen Tech's meteoric rise. He poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, the amber liquid catching the light as he swirled it in the crystal tumbler. His grandmother Emily had given him these glasses on his 21st birthday, telling him to save them for moments that mattered. How fitting to use them now, as he signed away her legacy while contemplating the granddaughter who carried her name but would never know her history. With a heavy sigh, Maxwell signed the final page of the acquisition agreement. Thompson Hotels, founded by his grandfather in 1928, expanded by his father, and now lost under his stewardship, would become merely a brand within the Marriott portfolio. His role would be ceremonial at best, with real decisions made by Marriott executives and, incredibly, by Sarah Jensen, who would hold a significant ownership stake. He opened his laptop and searched for Emily Thompson. There was little online presence for a 12-year-old, but he found a newspaper article about a regional mathematics competition. In the group photo of winners, Emily stood in the center, holding a trophy nearly as big as herself. His eyes, his mother's eyes, stared back at him from the screen. Maxwell's throat tightened as he studied the image. She had his features, but none of his entitled arrogance. Instead, there was a quiet confidence that reminded him of Sarah, the determination he had once mistaken for dullness. "She doesn't need you," he told himself bitterly. "She never has." Across town, Sarah and Emily shared dinner in their penthouse apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of Boston's skyline, the lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell. Emily was animatedly describing her upcoming science competition, while Sarah listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about her daughter's quantum computing project. "Mom, that man we met yesterday, Mr. Thompson, seemed sad," Emily observed suddenly, twirling pasta around her fork, like he lost something important. Sarah studied her daughter, confident, brilliant, compassionate, and answered gently, "Sometimes, Emily, people only realize the value of what they had when it's already too late." "Well, I hope he finds whatever he lost," Emily commented innocently. Sarah reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. Some treasures, when lost by choice, never can be recovered. As Emily chattered about her science project, Sarah glanced at her phone. A news alert announced the finalized acquisition of Thompson Hotels by Marriott International. A smaller note mentioned that technology security firm Jensen Tech would acquire a significant minority stake in the restructured company. Sarah felt no triumph as she read the announcement. Her success had never been about revenge. It had been about survival, then ambition, then creating a legacy for Emily. Maxwell's downfall brought her no joy, only a quiet acknowledgement that justice sometimes arrived in unexpected forms. While Maxwell Thompson signed away the last pieces of his family legacy alone in his hotel suite, Sarah and Emily laughed together over dessert, their bond unbreakable, the greatest treasure that no man could ever claim. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen,